You have 72 hours to tear down that monstrosity or I'm bringing in the authorities. Those were the harsh words Catherine Whitmore shrieked at me just before I unveiled the secret that would shatter her entire empire. I stood there, 4 days, into constructing my dream retreat, when this woman charged onto my property wielding official papers and an imperious attitude. Catherine Whitmore, Homeowners Association Supreme Commander, insisting I demolish everything because it violated neighborhood regulations. The aroma of fresh cedar from newly cut planks clashed with her suffocating cologne as gravel scattered beneath additional furious residents' SUVs. She brandished legal documents, promising devastating penalties, behaving as though she ruled the territory. She had no clue I possessed intelligence that would completely reverse this control struggle, intelligence that would transform her intimidation tactics into the costliest blunder of her existence. But before revealing how a single phone conversation legally demolished an entire HOA system, leave a comment. How would you handle neighbors attempting to seize your property? Share your viewing location. HOA horror stories connect us universally. Let me rewind and explain how this catastrophe began. I'm Daniel Hayes, 42, recently divorced plumber who inherited 4 acres of Montana wilderness paradise from my reclusive Uncle Theodore. Following weeks of legal battles and cramped apartment living, this land represented salvation, a place where I could construct something meaningful and possibly prove to my teenage son Ryan that his father wasn't a total disappointment. Uncle Theodore remained our family enigma, vanished into the wilderness in 1985, appeared at holidays smelling of campfire smoke and machinery oil, always mumbling about land containing deeper mysteries than forests. Most relatives dismissed him as the eccentric mountain hermit. When his attorney contacted me about inheriting his property, I suspected Uncle Theodore understood something others missed. The terrain was magnificent. Stream water bubbled over polished rocks. Eagle calls reverberated off limestone cliffs, and the crisp fragrance of spruce resin combined with native herbs created nature's signature scent. An ancient concrete slab showed where Theodore had begun, some project alongside a workshop resembling frontier-era craftsmanship. Standing there, inhaling air untainted by vehicle emissions, I experienced optimism for the first time in months. I liquidated my retirement fund, abandoned my urban job, and began building a humble log home. Nothing elaborate, just solid shelter, where Ryan could spend weekends and witness his dad creating something valuable instead of destroying his life. The cadence of hammer striking nail, the gratifying slice of blade through lumber. After months of attorneys and documents, genuine manual labor felt therapeutic. On construction day 4, she materialized. Catherine Whitmore emerged from a spotless, silver Lexus SUV like some corporate harbinger of doom. Late 50s, designer professional attire, gripping a leather briefcase like armor. Her stilettos clicked against rocky terrain with military rhythm, and her fragrance, some botanical weapon, clashed so violently with mountain atmosphere it stung my eyes. "Excuse me," she marched across my land as if she possessed it. "Are you the person responsible for this unauthorized building project?" I lowered my power saw, observing how she pronounced person like it tasted bitter. "Daniel Hayes, constructing a home on my property. You must be Catherine Whitmore, Summit Ridge HOA chairwoman." She rifled through documents with dramatic flair. "This construction violates numerous community agreements. No building permits, no design approval, no ecological review. Honestly, this primitive approach jeopardizes our property values considerably." I surveyed pristine wilderness extending to distant peaks. "What community? I see no neighboring homes." "The Summit Ridge Homeowners Association governs all residential properties within our boundaries." She presented an official appearing document. "Your uncle agreed to these covenants when we established them 7 months ago. You inherited his responsibilities." 7 months ago? Uncle Theodore died 9 months ago. She handed me a cease and desist notice demanding immediate construction. Termination plus a bill for $3,200 in accumulated violation fees. "Remove all materials within 72 hours, Catherine declared. "Daily penalties start at $600, increasing weekly. We take our community standards extremely seriously." The threat lingered in mountain air like distant smoke. Then she delivered her real message. Let me speak plainly, Mr. Hayes. Her gaze swept over my work clothes, weathered pickup, and roughened hands. This isn't the type of area where people in your circumstances usually prosper. We maintain specific expectations regarding resident caliber. I'd regret your son experiencing any uncomfortable situations. Mentioning Ryan felt like a blow to my chest. This woman had investigated me, discovered my divorce, financial troubles, my child. Are you threatening my family? The words emerged icier than intended. Catherine's smile cut like Arctic wind. I'm providing neighborly counsel. Some conflicts aren't worth pursuing, particularly when you're obviously overwhelmed. She returned to her Lexus but hesitated before departing. 72 hours, Mr. Hayes. Don't complicate this unnecessarily. As her taillights vanished down the mountain path, Uncle Theodore's parting words echoed in my mind. Never let bullies intimidate you. I studied the cease and desist order, then my partially completed cabin. Catherine Whitmore believed she held all the power. She was about to learn how devastatingly mistaken she was. Catherine didn't wait 3 days. She returned the following morning with legal counsel and supreme confidence. A battered Toyota Camry followed her Lexus and outstepped the most pathetic legal representation I'd witnessed. Gerald Powski appeared to have earned his law degree from a cereal box, cheap suit, stained necktie, briefcase secured with electrical tape and hope. Mr. Hayes, Catherine announced with theatrical authority, you're receiving official legal papers. Halt construction immediately and prepare for financial repercussions. Powski nervously shuffled documents. According to Summit Ridge HOA agreements, you owe $1,800 in retroactive violation penalties. Additionally, you never obtained proper HOA disclosure papers during property acquisition, invalidating your ownership assertions. $18,000 for building on my own land. The odor of Powski's anxious perspiration mixed with Catherine's overwhelming perfume created this poisonous atmosphere of legal bullying. I'll have my attorney examine these, I responded calmly. Catherine's laughter cracked like breaking ice. You cannot afford legal representation, Mr. Hayes. Spare yourself the humiliation. Once they departed, I drove directly to the county records office. Margaret, the helpful clerk, assisted me searching through property documentation. The musty scent of archived papers and fluorescent lighting created this detective story ambiance, as I discovered something that infuriated me. The Summit Ridge HOA formed precisely 7 months ago, 3 months after Uncle Theodore's death. I recalled my divorce lawyer explaining that timing in legal contracts is crucial, and this timing was impossible. The boundaries were drawn like a perfect bullseye around my property, encompassing only 15 homes. My 4 acres represented 70% of their total area. That's highly suspicious, Margaret whispered over property surveys. Appears someone designed those boundaries specifically to ensnare your uncle's land. I pulled additional records, discovering every HOA member was either Catherine's relative or employed by her husband's development company. This wasn't community governance. It was organized extortion with official paperwork. I'd read sufficient legal thrillers to know deceased individuals cannot sign new agreements, nor can you be bound by contracts created after you already own property. Time for my counterattack. I contacted Jennifer Chen, a brilliant property attorney. Her office smelled like fresh coffee and pure resolve. This is legally impossible, Jennifer declared, spreading documents across her conference table. You cannot retroactively bind a deceased person to new agreements formed after their death. I've encountered HOA schemes before, but this exceeds even their typical audacity. We're filing counter lawsuits, Jennifer announced. Harassment, fraudulent claims, intentional emotional distress, plus investigating how they included your property in boundaries drawn after ownership transfer. But Catherine escalated rapidly. 3 days later, she convened an emergency community gathering without inviting me. Naturally, my neighbor Tom attended and reported back over drinks on my deck. The evening air carried wood smoke from distant chimneys mixing with pine forest aromas that reminded me why I'd fallen in love with this place. She's got people petrified, Tom said, claiming you're some dangerous vagrant with criminal history. Complete fabrications, but fear spreads quicker than truth in small communities. Then came the digital assault. Catherine established a Summit Ridge Community Security Facebook group, posting my photographs stolen from an old trade publication, alongside warnings about transient criminals threatening our children and property values. The responses were venomous hate. "Remove this predator now. My children aren't secure. Police need to intervene immediately." But Catherine's hubris became her undoing. Eager to demonstrate the HOA possessed funds for legal action against troublemakers, she posted their financial statements publicly. Those figures revealed a shocking narrative. $127,000 collected in special fees over 7 months for 15 houses. That's over $75,000 per household. For what? No community facilities, no shared amenities, no improvement projects. I'd discovered during my divorce that legitimate expenses always have documentation. When lawyers cannot show exactly where your money disappeared, it usually ended up in someone's account. Jennifer nearly spilled her coffee when I showed her the Facebook evidence. She just publicly confessed to massive financial theft. Catherine handed us a federal case on a golden platter. The following morning brought Catherine's nuclear strategy. A county inspector's vehicle pulled into my driveway. The inspector, obviously uncomfortable, delivered a citation for multiple building violations that would completely shut down construction. "Sorry, friend," he muttered, avoiding direct eye contact. "Instructions from upper management. Someone has significant influence at the county building department." The metallic flavor of corruption hung in mountain air like smoke from a distant blaze. As his truck disappeared down the mountain road, I realized Catherine had crossed a boundary she couldn't retreat from. She'd escalated from civil harassment to government corruption, using taxpayer-funded officials to settle personal disputes. But she'd just provided me the ultimate weapon. Federal agencies don't just investigate financial fraud. They investigate public officials who accept bribes to harass private citizens. Catherine thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She had no idea I was about to overturn the entire game board. Catherine's next maneuver arrived at 2 a.m. with the sound of shattering glass and the sharp stench of gasoline burning my nostrils awake. I stumbled outside to find my construction area resembling a battlefield. Someone had taken a sledgehammer to my lumber stack, scattering boards like oversized matchsticks. My power generator lay overturned, fuel soaking into pine needles with that harsh chemical smell that made my eyes tear. Construction screws sparkled across my access route like hazardous glitter, strategically positioned to puncture any tire attempting passage. The message was unmistakable. Catherine had abandoned legal tactics. By dawn, I discovered my truck resting on 4 deflated tires and an anonymous environmental complaint in my inbox claiming I was destroying protected wetlands. The wetlands in question, a tiny seasonal stream that had flowed through my property since before Catherine was born. But the psychological warfare was just starting. Around midday, vehicles began appearing across my driveway entrance. Not completely, obstructing access that would be obviously illegal, just positioned so I'd need to perform driving acrobatics to reach my own property. When I approached the drivers, they claimed to be concerned citizens exercising their constitutional right to park on public streets. The taste of manufactured innocence was more bitter than the gasoline still lingering in the air. Then came the fraudulent warning signs. Official-looking hazardous construction zone, authorized personnel only, notices sprouted along the mountain road like toxic weeds. They appeared legitimate enough to fool my contractor Steve, who called in a panic. "Daniel, I've got 4 clients asking if I'm certified for hazardous material cleanup," Steve said, his voice strained with concern. "Word spreading that your site is contaminated. I can't risk losing other jobs over this." Catherine had weaponized my professional connections against me. I remembered reading somewhere that the most effective con artists always transform your own resources into weapons, and she was proving that theory perfectly. But sabotage indicated desperation, and desperate people create traceable errors. Jennifer and I spent the next day following documentation trails at the courthouse. The dusty smell of old records mixed with Margaret the clerk's coffee created this investigative atmosphere as we uncovered Catherine's actual scheme, Alpine Vista. Development had approached the county 7 months ago with plans for a $65 million luxury resort. The proposed location required my 4 acres as the scenic focal point. Spa overlooks, golf course elevation, private helipad proximity. According to the development contract, they couldn't begin construction without acquiring all residential properties within the designated tourism zone. My land wasn't just obstructing Catherine's plans, it was the master key to her fortune. "Examine this consultation payment," Margaret whispered, indicating a line buried in county planning records. Alpine Vista paid someone $525,000 for community relations consulting. Jennifer's coffee cup froze midway to her lips. "That's not consulting. That's a bribe with official documentation." Suddenly, Catherine's aggressive schedule made complete sense. She wasn't just collecting HOA payments. She was earning a massive commission for delivering my property to developers. Every day I resisted cost her hundreds of thousands in resort profits. That evening, I utilized my plumber skills to install a comprehensive surveillance system, motion detectors, infrared cameras, the complete setup. If Catherine wanted to escalate to criminal activity, she'd do it in high-definition color. I didn't wait long for the main event. Around midnight, a pickup truck crept down my access road with lights extinguished, engine barely whispering through the mountain quiet. The driver, wearing a sweatshirt that couldn't conceal his recognizable profile, began pouring something from a fuel container near my lumber pile. My cameras captured everything in perfect detail, including the moment he stared directly into the lens like a startled animal. Michael Whitmore, Catherine's son, 20-something kid who'd apparently inherited his mother's gift for felony-level foolishness. The following morning brought my counteroffensive. I entered the sheriff's station with flash drives full of video proof. Michael's midnight arson attempt, complete with facial identification and vehicle registration. Suddenly, Catherine's concerned citizen story collapsed faster than her son's. Excuse under interrogation. But I wasn't finished investigating. The HOA's public records revealed a goldmine of financial fraud, security consulting payments to non-existent companies, landscaping services from Catherine's brother-in-law who lived in Texas, and legal research fees that would embarrass Supreme Court justices. Catherine had been systematically pillaging the HOA treasury while positioning herself for the resort payoff, stealing from neighbors today while planning to profit from their property tomorrow. As I watched Michael's arson footage for the 6th time that evening, the mountain air carrying the scent of spruce and approaching storm clouds, I understood something crucial. Catherine wasn't just greedy, she was cornered. The resort deal probably had deadlines, and every day I remained meant she risked losing everything. Trapped animals bite hardest just before they collapse, but they also make the most spectacular mistakes. Catherine's response to her son's arrest was swift, vicious, and completely unhinged. The next morning, I woke to find a legal server on my doorstep with an emergency injunction. Catherine was alleging I was constructing an illegal commercial facility and demanding the court force me to demolish everything immediately. The documentation claimed I was planning to operate a transient housing operation for undesirable elements that would destroy the moral foundation of our community. The smell of fresh legal ink mixed with morning spruce air as I read through 18 pages of creative fiction. Catherine wanted $125,000 in community damages and was requesting an immediate restraining order preventing me from accessing my own property. But that was just the opening act. By noon, 4 county inspectors swarmed my land like locusts: environmental, compliance, building safety, septic evaluation, all issuing citations for violations that didn't exist. The lead inspector, Martinez, kept apologizing under his breath while photographing my perfectly legal plumbing work. "Sorry, buddy," he whispered. "Orders from well above my authority level. Someone's paying substantial money to make your existence miserable." The metallic taste of corruption hung heavier than the mountain mist rolling in. During my divorce, I'd learned that when legal intimidation fails, bureaucratic harassment becomes the preferred weapon. Endless inspections, impossible. Compliance demands, death by 1,000 paper cuts. But Catherine saved her cruelest attack for last. That afternoon, my ex-wife Rachel called, her voice trembling with rage. Daniel, what the hell is happening? Ryan's friends are showing him Facebook posts calling you a registered offender. He's locked in his room crying, asking if his father is really a monster. My blood turned glacial cold. What posts? Some community safety group with your photo and warnings about registered predators targeting children. Complete lies, but Ryan's classmates are treating him like he's infected. Rachel's voice broke. He wants to know if he's safe visiting you anymore. The thought of my 16-year-old son reading those lies, having friends whisper and stare, made my vision blur with fury. Catherine had weaponized my own child against me, crossing every boundary that mattered. It's all manufactured, Rachel. I'm fighting a corrupt HOA trying to steal my land for developers. Fix this, she snapped. Some judges consider social media scandals harmful to minors. This could impact your custody arrangements. After she hung up, I sat in Uncle Theodore's workshop, surrounded by the scent of aged wood and motor oil, feeling 50 years of family history pressing down on me. This wasn't about property anymore. Catherine was threatening my relationship with the only person who truly mattered, but her desperation had created my opportunity. That evening, my neighbor Tom knocked with urgent intelligence. Daniel, Catherine's group posted another emergency alert claiming you threatened to burn down the neighborhood. They're using a photo of you holding what appears to be a weapon. Actually, your reciprocating saw, but photographed to look menacing. The Facebook comments were a feeding frenzy. Call SWAT, armed and dangerous, protect our children. But Tom leaned closer with the real information. 4 HOA families approached me privately. Catherine is threatening their property evaluations if they don't sign statements against you. They're terrified of her now, not you. More importantly, HOA Treasurer Linda Patterson had been asking uncomfortable questions about missing funds. Catherine had been avoiding audit requests while demanding additional special assessments from members. Linda found invoices for companies that don't exist, Tom whispered. Payments for work never completed. She's demanding a comprehensive financial review, and Catherine's in full panic mode. This provided the counterattack I needed. I called Jennifer immediately. Catherine's financial house of cards is crumbling. If we can force an emergency HOA audit before she destroys evidence, we have her. Even better, Jennifer said. False. Offender accusations are federal defamation crimes. We can file criminal charges while pursuing the financial fraud. But I wanted to strike Catherine where it truly hurt, her wallet. The following morning, I visited every business Catherine's family-owned or patronized. Armed with screenshots of her false posts about me being a dangerous predator, I had very calm, factual discussions with managers about their liability for supporting defamatory campaigns against local citizens. Small mountain communities survive on reputation. When the auto shop, market, and lumber yard all suddenly became too busy to serve, the Whitmore family, word spread faster than wildfire. By afternoon, Catherine's own mother called her demanding an explanation for why the family was being ostracized by local businesses. That evening, as storm clouds gathered over the mountains and rain began drumming against my cabin windows, I felt the momentum finally shifting. Catherine had overextended herself, attacking too many fronts simultaneously while her financial crimes were being exposed. But I also knew desperate criminals don't surrender quietly. They detonate everything around them. The smell of approaching rain mixed with spruce sap reminded me of Uncle Theodore's final words about the land having secrets. Tomorrow I would discover exactly what he meant, and Catherine Whitmore would learn that some secrets have the power to destroy entire empires. The next morning, I was prying up floorboards in Uncle Theodore's workshop when my crowbar struck something that definitely wasn't wood. The metallic clang echoed through the dusty space like a bell announcing fate. Beneath 50 years of accumulated sawdust and oil stains, I found a steel lockbox the size of a briefcase, painted olive drab and secured with a combination that had probably been set during the Reagan administration. The musty smell of old documents hit me like a wave when I finally opened it, using Uncle Theodore's birthday. The old romantic had used the day he purchased this land. Inside were manila folders thick as dictionaries, corporate stamps that felt substantial as gold coins, and sufficient legal paperwork to overwhelm a courthouse. But it was the incorporation certificate on top that made my hands tremble. Hayes Holdings, LLC. Incorporated April 22, 1999. Sole proprietor, Theodore R. Hayes. My uncle hadn't just owned 4 acres of mountain paradise. He'd secretly formed a holding company 26 years ago and used it to quietly acquire something that would change everything. The next document explained how he'd accomplished the financial coup of the century. In 2011, the original developer who built the Summit Ridge subdivision went bankrupt during the housing crash. While everyone else was fleeing real estate, Uncle Theodore stepped in like a ghost and purchased all the defaulted mortgage debt for pennies on the dollar. Not the houses, the actual land underneath them. Every single property in what would become Catherine's HOA kingdom was built on land that Uncle Theodore owned through his holding company. The homeowners had been paying their mortgages faithfully for over a decade, thinking they owned their land. But legally, they were tenants, and the property management company that collected their monthly payments forwarded everything to Hayes Holdings, LLC, which explained how a mountain hermit could afford his comfortable lifestyle. I was holding the deed to an entire neighborhood, 52 houses, 15 of which had formed Catherine's precious HOA, all of them sitting on land that belonged to me now. The taste of Uncle Theodore's pipe tobacco still lingered in the workshop air, mixed with the weight of documents that felt like they could move mountains. I understood now why he'd kept this secret buried. Owning people's homes without them knowing is the kind of revelation that destroys families and fractures communities, but it also meant something else, something that made my pulse hammer against my temples. Catherine Whitmore, HOA chairwoman and queen of harassment, had been collecting fees and threatening penalties on land she didn't own. Her own house, the command center for her intimidation campaign, was sitting on property where she was 4 months behind on rent. I could legally evict her with 30 days' notice. The bank records in the lockbox showed everything: monthly rent payments flowing into Hayes Holdings accounts, property tax receipts, maintenance expenses for roads and utilities that the homeowners thought they were paying for through their HOA fees. Uncle Theodore had been the invisible landlord for an entire community, collecting rent through a management company while letting people believe they owned their land. The incorporation papers were authentic, stamped with official state seals, and notarized by attorneys whose signatures could be verified. The property deeds matched perfectly with county records. The bank accounts were real, and the money trail was clear as mountain stream water. I sat in Uncle Theodore's workshop chair, surrounded by the scent of old leather and forgotten secrets, holding papers that gave me more power over Catherine Whitmore than she'd ever imagined possible. I could evict every HOA member who'd participated in harassing me. I could sell the entire development to Alpine Vista Development and become a millionaire overnight. I could destroy lives the same way Catherine had tried to destroy mine. But Uncle Theodore's final words echoed in the dusty air. Never let bullies intimidate you. He hadn't said retaliate harder. He'd said don't let them intimidate you. There was a difference, and that difference would determine what kind of man I chose to be. The weight of Uncle Theodore's secret sat on my shoulders like a lead blanket. As I spread the incorporation documents across Jennifer's conference table, the smell of fresh coffee mixed with the gravity of what we'd discovered. I wasn't just fighting an HOA anymore. I was the landlord of everyone who'd been trying to destroy me. This is legally ironclad, Jennifer said, examining the corporate seal under her desk lamp. Your uncle was meticulous. Every document properly filed, every payment tracked, every legal requirement met for 26 years. She pulled out a legal pad and started sketching our options like a general planning. A campaign. Plan A, reveal your landlord status immediately and negotiate HOA dissolution. Clean, simple, gets Catherine off your back permanently. Plan B, selective enforcement, terminate leases only for the harassment ringleaders. Catherine, her family, maybe 3 or 4 others. Let the innocent neighbors stay. Plan C, full nuclear option. Media exposure of the entire scheme. Federal investigation of HOA financial crimes. Complete community upheaval. I thought about Ryan reading those horrible Facebook posts about my neighbors who'd been manipulated by Catherine's lies about Uncle Theodore choosing to keep this power secret for decades. What about Plan D? Use the leverage to build something better. Jennifer's eyebrows rose. Explain. Catherine's been stealing from these people while lying about property ownership. What if we expose the financial crimes but offer the community a path forward? Reduced rents, actual ownership opportunities. Turn this toxic HOA into something that helps families instead of destroying them. While Jennifer researched legal precedents, I called my plumber buddy Tom to help with the technical preparation. We drove to his shop where the familiar smell of copper pipe and fitting compounds reminded me that I had skills beyond legal warfare. "You're really going to need this recorded," Tom said, helping me test a professional-grade audio system. "When you drop this bombshell, you want every word documented for legal protection." Back in my truck, I reflected on something I'd learned during my apprenticeship years ago. The most powerful plumbing systems aren't the ones that create the biggest pressure surges. They're the ones that deliver exactly the right amount of flow to get the job done. Too little and nothing happens. Too much and you burst the pipes. This situation required precisely calibrated pressure. That afternoon, I brought in Linda Patterson, the HOA treasurer who'd been asking uncomfortable questions about the finances. We met at a neutral location, the local cafe, where the scent of fresh bread and honest conversation felt like a sanctuary after weeks of legal warfare. "I've been suspicious about our books for months," Linda confided over coffee that tasted like liquid courage. "Catherine's been dodging audit requests while collecting unprecedented fees. We've paid $127,000 in special assessments this year alone, but I can't find records of where that money went." I slid photocopies of Catherine's fraudulent invoices across the table. Companies that don't exist, services never performed, consulting fees that would make Congress blush. Linda's hands shook as she reviewed the evidence. "She's been stealing from us while threatening our homes. But Daniel, even if we expose her, how do we protect families who've invested their life savings in these properties?" That's when I knew Plan D was the right choice. Over the next 3 days, Jennifer and I crafted a presentation that would serve multiple purposes. We'd expose Catherine's crimes while offering the community a path forward that honored both justice and compassion. The legal documents were prepared in triplicate, stored in multiple secure locations with copies sent to federal investigators who specialize in HOA fraud cases. I also reached out to Ryan for the first time since Rachel's angry phone call. My son's voice was small and hurt when he answered, but I could hear hope creeping in as I explained the truth about Catherine's lies. "So you're not really in trouble, Dad? The stuff online about you being dangerous, it's all fake?" "Completely fabricated, son. And soon everyone will know the truth, but Ryan, I need you to understand something important. When people try to hurt you with lies, the best response isn't more lies. It's the truth delivered at exactly the right moment." The community meeting was scheduled for Saturday evening at the Summit Ridge Community Center. Catherine had called it as an emergency session to address the dangerous individual threatening our neighborhood. She had no idea she was about to provide the perfect stage for her own downfall. As I sat in my completed cabin that evening, listening to the stream babble through the spruce trees and watching stars appear in the clear mountain sky, I felt Uncle Theodore's presence in the night air. He'd kept this secret for decades, waiting for the right person and the right moment to use it wisely. That moment had arrived. And unlike Catherine's campaign of destruction, this revelation would build something better from the ashes of her greed. Tomorrow night, truth would have its day in court. Catherine's desperation reached new heights when she tried to have me committed to a psychiatric facility. The paperwork arrived Wednesday morning via emergency court filing, a petition claiming I was displaying signs of severe mental instability and making credible threats against community members. Catherine had somehow convinced a judge that I was dangerous enough to require immediate psychological evaluation and possible involuntary commitment. The smell of fresh legal documents mixed with my morning coffee created a surreal breakfast atmosphere as I read through her latest work of fiction. According to Catherine's sworn statement, I had been obsessively surveilling neighbors, making threats about burning down houses, and exhibiting classic signs of paranoid delusion and violent ideation. She'd even included witness statements from 4 HOA members claiming I'd approach them at night, ranting about conspiracies and threatening to make everyone pay for what they'd done to me. Complete fabrication, but terrifyingly official-looking. By noon, things escalated beyond legal documents. A convoy of pickup trucks appeared at the end of my access road. Catherine's citizen patrol armed with hunting rifles and self-righteous fury. They weren't technically on my property, but their message was clear. Step out of line and face frontier. Justice. The metallic taste of fear mixed with mountain air as I watched them through binoculars from my cabin porch. These weren't professional security guards. They were scared neighbors who'd been convinced I was a genuine threat to their families. Tom called with worse news. Daniel, Catherine's brother-in-law is the county sheriff. He's planning to serve that mental health warrant this afternoon with a full tactical response. Claims you're armed and dangerous, requiring maximum force protocols. My blood went cold. During my plumber days, I'd worked in the homes of guys who'd been swatted over neighbor disputes. Too many of those stories ended with body bags and accidental shootings during dynamic entries. But Catherine's overreach was also creating unexpected allies. That afternoon, Ryan called, crying, not from embarrassment this time, but from fury. Dad, kids at school are showing me posts claiming you're a terrorist planning to shoot up the neighborhood. This is insane. How can she just lie like this? Because desperate people do desperate things, son. But sometimes their desperation becomes their downfall. Ryan's voice grew steely. He had more of his old man's fight than I'd realized. What can I do to help? I'm not letting this crazy woman destroy our family with lies. While Catherine was busy painting me as a dangerous lunatic, she was also frantically trying to cover her financial tracks. Jennifer's investigator friend discovered Catherine had been making substantial cash withdrawals from HOA accounts, $164,000 in the past 3 weeks alone. The money was supposedly for enhanced security consulting and emergency legal expenses. More telling, she'd been pressuring HOA members to sign loyalty pledges, promising not to cooperate with outside investigators trying to destroy our community. 4 families had already approached Jennifer quietly, terrified of Catherine but unwilling to publicly oppose her. But Catherine's nuclear option backfired spectacularly. The mental health petition required supporting documentation from medical professionals. Catherine had submitted a psychological evaluation from Dr. Marcus Shelton, claiming he'd observed me displaying textbook symptoms of antisocial personality disorder with violent tendencies. Problem was, Dr. Shelton had been dead for 8 months. Jennifer's paralegal discovered the death certificate while verifying the evaluation's authenticity. Catherine had literally forged a psychological assessment using a deceased psychiatrist's stolen letterhead and signature stamp. That single desperate lie had just upgraded her legal troubles from civil fraud to federal document forgery, a felony carrying up to 12 years in prison. She's completely unraveling, Jennifer said, reviewing the fraudulent evaluation. This level of criminal behavior suggests someone facing massive financial exposure. The resort deal must have deadlines she can't extend. But Catherine wasn't finished destroying herself. Friday evening brought her final, most spectacular mistake. Frustrated by the delayed tactical response, turns out judges get cranky about obviously forged medical documents. Catherine decided to take matters into her own hands. Security cameras caught her sneaking onto my property around midnight, carrying what appeared to be accelerant and matches. Her plan was apparently to set a small fire near my lumber pile, then call 911 claiming I was burning evidence of my criminal activities. The irony was perfect. Catherine Whitmore, who'd been calling me an arsonist for weeks, was literally attempting arson to frame me for arson. But my upgraded security system included motion-activated floodlights that turned midnight into noon the second she crossed my property line. Catherine found herself standing in my driveway holding a gas can and road flares, illuminated like an actress on Broadway with 4 different camera angles recording her every move. Her scream of surprise and rage echoed across the mountain valley loud enough to wake bears in neighboring counties. As I watched her scramble back to her Lexus, I realized Catherine had just handed me the ultimate trump card. Video evidence of her attempting to commit the exact crime she'd been accusing me of planning. Tomorrow's community meeting was going to be even more interesting than I'd anticipated. Catherine's final desperate gambit came with sirens, flashing lights, and the kind of media circus that destroys lives permanently. Saturday morning, I woke to the sound of helicopter rotors and the acrid smell of exhaust fumes from a dozen emergency vehicles parked across my access road. Through my cabin windows, I could see news vans, sheriff's deputies, and what looked like half the county's emergency response team setting up a perimeter around my property. My phone was buzzing with missed calls from reporters, all asking variations of the same question. How do you respond to allegations that you're holding your neighborhood hostage with explosive devices? Explosive devices. I stepped onto my porch, holding a cup of coffee, and immediately had 7 rifle scopes trained on my chest. Daniel Hayes! Sheriff Rodriguez's voice boomed through a megaphone. You are surrounded. Come out with your hands visible. The taste of surreal terror mixed with mountain air as I realized Catherine had played her nuclear card. She'd convinced law enforcement that I was some kind of domestic terrorist preparing for a violent standoff. Tom's voice crackled through my phone. Daniel, don't move. Catherine filed reports claiming you threatened to blow up the community center during tonight's meeting. She's got photos of you handling suspicious packages and testimony from 4 witnesses. The suspicious packages, bags of cement mixed from my cabin foundation. The witnesses, probably the same imaginary people who'd provided statements for her fraudulent psychological evaluation. But this time, Catherine had overestimated the gullibility of law enforcement. Sheriff Rodriguez approached my porch cautiously, his expression more embarrassed than aggressive. Daniel, I know this is probably ridiculous, but we got federal authorities breathing down our necks about credible terrorist threats. I need you to let us search the property so we can clear this mess up. Search away, Sheriff, but you might want to check out the security footage from last night first. I handed him the USB drive containing Catherine's midnight arson attempt. Rodriguez's face went through several interesting color changes as he watched our HOA chairwoman caught red-handed with accelerant and matches, trying to burn down the property she'd been claiming I wanted to destroy. Well, he muttered, that's going to complicate her credibility significantly. While the bomb squad spent 4 hours confirming that cement mix was in fact cement mix, Jennifer was busy filing emergency motions to have Catherine arrested for filing false police reports, attempted arson, and terrorist threat hoaxes. Federal crimes that would put her away for decades. But the media circus was just getting started. By afternoon, news crews from Denver had arrived, drawn by reports of a mountain standoff with alleged domestic terrorist. Catherine, ever the opportunist, positioned herself as the heroic community leader protecting innocent families from a dangerous extremist. Standing in front of cameras with perfect makeup and practiced tears, she painted a picture of a peaceful neighborhood terrorized by an unstable outsider with a grudge against civilization itself. This man has threatened our children, destroyed our sense of safety, and now he's apparently prepared to commit mass violence rather than follow simple community guidelines. Catherine sobbed into the microphones. We just want our neighborhood back. The performance was Oscar caliber if the Academy gave awards for creative fiction. But Catherine's media strategy contained a fatal flaw. In her rush to appear sympathetic, she'd agreed to multiple live interviews without consulting lawyers, and live television doesn't allow for editing out inconvenient truths. Channel 9's investigative reporter Sandra Martinez had done her homework. During what Catherine thought would be a softball interview, Sandra casually mentioned the HOA's financial irregularities. Mrs. Whitmore, records show your association has collected nearly $1.1 million in special assessments this year. Can you explain where that money was spent? Catherine's confident expression flickered like a candle in wind. Well, we've had significant legal expenses dealing with this dangerous individual, but the legal expenses listed in your public filings total only $31,000. Where did the other $107 million go? The pause that followed lasted about 4 seconds on television but felt like 4 years in real time. Catherine's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air while her brain tried to manufacture an answer that wouldn't incriminate her further. That's confidential community business, she finally stammered. Confidential? Mrs. Whitmore, you're discussing this matter on live television while accusing your neighbor of terrorism. Surely financial transparency is relevant to your credibility. By evening, the story had shifted from dangerous mountain hermit threatens community to HOA chairwoman accused of massive fraud while filing false terror reports. Social media was buzzing with questions about Catherine's financial management and the suspicious timing of her escalating accusations. As the last news van disappeared down the mountain road, leaving behind only tire tracks and the lingering smell of diesel exhaust, I realized Catherine had just committed professional suicide on live television. Tonight's community meeting would be less about her accusations against me and more about her explanations to neighbors whose money she'd been stealing. The hunted had just become the hunter. The Summit Ridge Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. 97 people packed into a space designed for maybe 65, with news cameras positioned along the walls and county officials occupying the front row like judges at a trial. The smell of nervous sweat mixed with the scent of old coffee and decades-old carpet created an atmosphere thick enough to cut with a knife. Catherine stood at the podium like a general addressing troops before battle. Her PowerPoint presentation was titled Protecting Our Community, the Daniel Hayes Threat Assessment. She dressed for victory, sharp business suit, perfect makeup, voice projection that would make theater directors weep with envy. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, clicking to a slide showing my cabin, "we gather tonight to address the clear and present danger that Daniel Hayes represents to our peaceful community." I sat in the back row wearing my cleanest work shirt and holding a leather document folder that contained enough legal dynamite to level mountains. Jennifer sat beside me, occasionally glancing at her phone where federal investigators were sending real-time updates about Catherine's financial crimes. Catherine's presentation was masterful manipulation. Photos of my threatening construction project, screenshots of my menacing social media presence, actually pictures of plumbing work I'd posted to help other contractors, charts showing declining property values in areas with transient populations. "This individual owes our community $127,000 in accumulated fines and legal fees," Catherine announced, her voice rising with righteous indignation. "He has repeatedly threatened violence against families, attempted to intimidate our children, and yesterday was investigated by federal authorities for terrorist activities." The crowd murmured with fearful approval. These were good people who'd been fed a steady diet of lies for months, and Catherine's performance was convincing enough to sell ice to Eskimos. "Furthermore," she continued, clicking to a financial slide, "Mr. Hayes's continued presence threatens a major economic development opportunity that could benefit every family in this room. Alpine Vista Development has offered our community partnership in a $65 million project that would create jobs and increase property values significantly." There it was, the real motivation finally revealed in public, recorded by 4 news cameras and witnessed by county officials. Catherine had just admitted on the record that this entire harassment campaign was about clearing my land for developers. She opened the floor for victim impact statements, and 4 rehearsed neighbors delivered tearful testimonies about feeling unsafe and terrorized by my presence. The performance was so synchronized it looked like community theater. Then Catherine made the mistake that would haunt her forever. Does anyone else have concerns about this dangerous individual threatening our community? I stood up slowly, my leather folder tucked under one arm. "I do, actually." Catherine's confident smile faltered like a mask slipping. You're not a member of this community. You have no right to speak here." "Actually, Catherine," I said, walking calmly toward the front, "I think you'll find I have every right to speak. In fact, I have more rights in this room than anyone else." The crowd's murmur shifted from supportive to confused. Catherine's face was turning the color of old snow as I approached the podium. "My name is Daniel Hayes," I announced to the room, "and I'm the sole owner of Hayes Holdings, LLC. I opened my folder and removed Uncle Theodore's incorporation documents, holding them high enough for the cameras to capture, which means I'm the legal landlord of every single house in this subdivision." The silence that followed was so complete, you could hear individual heartbeats. Then the room exploded into chaos, gasps, shouts, the scraping of chairs as people turned to stare at neighbors they'd never realized were fellow tenants. Catherine grabbed for my documents like a drowning woman reaching for a life preserver. "That's impossible. This is our neighborhood. We own these homes." You own the structures, Catherine, but the land underneath, that belongs to me, has for 26 years through my uncle's holding company. I spread the property deeds across the podium like playing cards. Every monthly payment you thought was going to your mortgage company was actually rent forwarded to Hayes Holdings. Every HOA fee you've been collecting, you've been stealing money from people for managing land you don't own. Sheriff Rodriguez stepped forward, his expression grim with understanding. Mrs. Whitmore, you've been collecting association fees on property that belongs to Mr. Hayes. Catherine's mask finally cracked completely. You can't do this. I've spent years building this community. You're just some drifter who doesn't belong here. Actually, I said, pulling out the rent payment records, you're 4 months behind on your own rent, which means I have legal grounds to evict you with 30 days' notice. The room erupted again. Catherine lunged for the documents, screaming about property rights and community standards until Sheriff Rodriguez was forced to restrain her. But I'm not here for revenge, I announced over the chaos. I'm here to offer partnership. Those of you who participated in harassment campaigns have 30 days to find new housing. Everyone else, your rent just got cut in half, and we're building a real community together. As federal agents entered the room to arrest Catherine for wire fraud, her final scream echoed through the mountains. You can't do this to me. I am this community. But communities aren't built on theft and lies. They're built on truth. 4 months later, I was sitting on my cabin porch watching neighborhood children play safely in what used to be Catherine's restricted access common area when Ryan arrived. For his weekend visit with a huge smile and news that made my heart soar. Dad, I got into Colorado State with a full scholarship, he announced, wrapping me in a bear hug that smelled like his mother's shampoo and teenage hope. And you know what convinced the admissions committee? My essay about how my father taught me that real strength isn't about getting revenge. It's about building something better from the ashes of corruption. Catherine Whitmore was serving 22 months in federal prison, plus paying $195,000 in restitution to the families she'd defrauded. 7 of her harassment enablers had quietly moved away, their leases terminated and their crimes documented for posterity. The remaining 45 neighbors had embraced our community transformation with enthusiasm that surprised everyone, especially me. The smell of barbecue smoke drifted from Tom's backyard where half the neighborhood was gathered for our monthly potluck dinner. These same people who'd once viewed me as a dangerous outsider now brought me casseroles, borrowed my tools, and asked my advice on everything from plumbing problems to teenager management. Fear dissolves quickly when the person spreading it disappears. It's incredible how rapidly fear dissolves when the person spreading it disappears, Jennifer observed, joining Ryan and me on the porch with a beer and the satisfied smile of someone who'd helped David slay Goliath. Our professional relationship had bloomed into something deeper, built on mutual respect and shared victory over institutional corruption. The community transformation exceeded my wildest dreams. With rent reduced to half their previous mortgage payments, families suddenly had money for home improvements, their children's education, and actual emergency savings. Mrs. Johnson had started a thriving community garden where Catherine's aesthetics compliance committee used to issue citations for unapproved flower colors. The kids who'd once been taught to fear me now knocked on my door asking for help with science projects, drawn by stories of the plumber who'd outsmarted the adults with nothing but patience and legal documents. But the most meaningful change was the Theodore Hayes Community Justice Fund, established with money recovered from Catherine's fraudulent schemes. The fund now provided free legal aid for families fighting corrupt homeowner associations across 4 states and had already helped expose similar financial crimes in 23 communities. We got another call yesterday, Jennifer reported, checking her phone. Family in Nevada facing the exact same playbook, city council trying to condemn their family ranch for a Tesla facility, using the same bogus community benefit arguments Catherine used for her resort deal. Ryan looked up from his scholarship letter, eyes blazing with inherited determination. Are we going to help them, Dad? We're going to try, son. Uncle Theodore taught me that real power builds communities instead of tearing them down. The financial resolution had been surprisingly healing. Rather than maximizing profits, I'd offered longtime residents the opportunity to purchase their land at cost with zero-interest financing through the Justice Fund. Most chose to stay and become genuine homeowners for the first time in decades. The development rights Catherine had promised to Alpine Vista Development. I donated them to the Colorado Conservation Trust, ensuring the surrounding wilderness would remain wild for Ryan's children and their grandchildren to explore. Property values had actually increased despite, or perhaps because of, the cooperation that replaced Catherine's authoritarian control. Turns out people pay premium prices to live where neighbors help instead of harass each other. As purple twilight settled over the mountain peaks, I reflected on Uncle Theodore's profound wisdom. He'd kept the secret of land ownership for decades, waiting for the right person and moment to use that power constructively. Some secrets are too dangerous for weak hands but become instruments of justice in strong ones. Ryan was reading college brochures by porchlight when Jennifer handed me a thick envelope postmarked from Las Vegas. That Nevada family I mentioned, they've heard about our victory and want to know if the guy who destroyed an entire corrupt HOA can help them save their century-old ranch from corporate greed. I opened the envelope, breathing in the scent of hope and new challenges. Another David versus Goliath story. Another chance to prove that ordinary people with extraordinary determination can still triumph against corrupt systems. Ready for your old man to take on City Hall next, Ryan? His grin was pure mischief mixed with fierce pride. Let's do it, Dad. But this time, I want to help with the legal research. As we planned our next battle for justice, children's laughter echoed across the valley where Catherine's angry threats used to ring. Sometimes the sweetest victory is building something so beautiful, it erases the memory of ugliness. Drop a comment sharing your own HOA nightmare story. You're not alone in these battles, and your experience might help other families fighting similar corruption. If this story helped you understand your rights against predatory community associations, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell for community justice stories, where we expose the truth about power-hungry neighbors and the legal weapons ordinary people can use to fight back. Next week, when City Council tried to steal our family ranch for a Tesla warehouse, they had no idea about great-grandfather's mining claims. Thanks for watching Community Justice Stories. If this episode made you laugh or shake your head at HOA madness, hit that like button and drop your thoughts below. We post HOA Karen chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week, so be sure to subscribe to catch the next unbelievable story.